Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk. You join me today at the wheel of a car you may well recognise. Yes, I am finally test driving and reviewing the little blue Fiesta we saved from a Hedge the other day. Hello, welcome back to Furious Driving. Now you may remember this Fiesta from such films as Hedge Road Fiesta Rescue and Cleaning the Hedge Find Fiesta and Skippy the Dancing Mule. Now, having rescued the car, put it through an MOT, in the last video we cleaned it to within an inch of its life. It's been used for about 2 weeks now, actually on the road, so it's got a little bit grubby, but it's still quite presentable. It seemed like a very good idea to actually review the car and tell you what it's like to drive a Mk6 Ford Fiesta. And this is an excellent example because this is a really lived-in one that's been used, abused, it's done a lot of miles. It shows what a typical used Fiesta would be like. The Mk6 Fiesta ran from 2002 to 2008. Now, if you look online, there's a little bit of confusion as to what is a Mark V and a Mk6, because the Mark IV was facelifted, and some people call that the Mark IV still, and others call that the Mark V as a separate car. Wikipedia might call it a Mark V, but Ford calls it a Mk6, so I'm going with Ford. The Mark IV/5 had been on the market for too long really. The rivals from Vauxhall, Peugeot, Renault, everyone else had overtaken it in terms of spec and drive quality, space inside the car, everything really. And so Ford really had to make a massive effort to improve their new model and make it stand out and be the best in class once again. And they threw everything at it and it kind of stuck. Now, whereas the previous generation Fiestas had been kind of soft and bubbly looking, as the Escorts had been as well back in the early 90s, the new shaped car was following Ford's new Edge design, which was the sharper, edgier, creased look, pioneered by Jack Telnack, who was Vice President of Design at Ford from 1980 to 1997, so this kind of stuff was very much his work. And it follows on from the style of the Mark I Focus and the Mark III Mondeo, which all have these same kind of sharp creases everywhere, creases in the bonnet. And we see the dashboard and the switchgear in particular, you'll see the similarity. These headlights, although they're much taller and squarer than on the Focus or the Mondeo, they still have the same kind of angles, and you can see the family resemblance, and very much so, especially with the Focus on this new wide, low grille with a little diamond pattern in it. Around the back, we've got these tall, kind of rear post hugging lights, which rise up the length of the C or D post, which seemed to be a very popular thing in the late 90s, early noughties. It's a good bit of design for two reasons. Firstly, it's safety. It's right in the following driver's eye line. There's also the third brake lights up here, which also houses the rear screen washer, but also in terms of using real estate of the car. It's a good use of the car's sort of limited space in a relatively small vehicle, and also because the car is quite sort of short and squat, it helps break up the shape and stops it looking sort of wide and dumpy. Now, this car is a 2005 car, and in November of that year the car got a facelift. It wasn't massive, it was more detail changes. The front and rear lights were altered to just give it a fresher look. The fog lights down the bottom were differed. In fact, one of the easiest ways to tell if you're looking at a pre or post facelift Fiesta is to look at the side mouldings, because on this one they are the same width all the way from front to back. On a facelift car they open out like a very slow triangle. Pull the bonnet release and this little tag pops forward and lets you into the engine bay. My word, that's so shiny. I wonder who did that. Now, under the bonnet, there were a plethora of options. There was a 1.25, a 1.3, a 1.4, a 1.6, and a 2-litre ST, as well as the 1.4, a 1.6 TDCi diesels. Now, this has got the 1.4 Duratec. The Duratecs were actually carried over from the previous generation, where they were known as the Zetecs, but around this time, Zetec was rebranded as a sporty option, and so it wasn't called that anymore. The 1.4 was a good choice. It made a decent amount of power, it was nice and smooth, and it was very reliable. It made 78 horsepower and 124 Newton meters of torque. I imagine it still does. In terms of maintenance, as we recently saw on this very channel, looking after one of these cars is really easy and extremely cheap as well. A full service cost, well, under £100. Battery was the most expensive part by a long way, and air filter was a couple of pounds. In fact, the air filter is a difficult thing really to change because this massive plastic block here unbolts. Then there are 10 torque screws underneath it which need to be undone, which is a lot of faff. But then it's just really simple, cheap parts that are easy to access with this taken off. Oil change is very easy. You can virtually reach underneath for the bumper and do it without jacking the car up. 4 spark plugs, easily accessible here. The timing belt is a 100,000 mile and 10-year interval, which is phenomenal. So this car doesn't need one for about 6 more years. Most cars I've had need a timing belt the day I get it because they've been laid up for 2 or 3 years, and that's put it over its time limit. However, when you do it, it is actually quite a big job, but at least it's not that common. One common issue with these engines, which this one is actually suffering with, is the rocker cover gasket does tend to perish fairly rapidly and then drop oil into the spark plug wells. And this car's going to have that done this afternoon. It's not a difficult job, but I'm be filming something else, so someone else is doing it. Yay! Now, what is really striking about being inside the Mk6 Fiesta is how much room there is in here. For a small car, it is massive inside. And what's also surprising is that in a segment where price cutting and budget constraints are so cutthroat because the margins on cars of this size aren't that huge, the quality of the materials is really impressive. If you think this car has been abused for 125,000 miles, and look at how it scrubs up, it's astonishing. Apparently in the November 2005 facelift, they actually improved the materials in the cabin, but I'm not quite sure where they went with it because already it's pretty decent. Let's have a look and see what we've got in this car. There's no badge on the boot and there's no documentation beyond the V5 with this car to tell us what model we're sat in, but I think it's a mid-range one. I think it's a Zetec. So let's see what we've got in here. Right, first of all, the doors. Lots of hard plastic elephant hide, which is not soft touch, it's just hard wearing plastic, which has worn hard. It's done well. In the top of the door we've got a little vent blowing onto the window to keep it demisted at all times, and we've got the electric door mirror switch, which you'll find in Focuses and Mondeos and things of the same period. The design of the door card, like the dashboard, is this new edge look. It's the sharp creases, angular curves, if that makes sense, and lots of geometric stuff going on. So we've got just slightly off horizontal line at the top of this padded material area, going down into a gentle curve into a straight slash, which separates the loudspeaker and the door handle, which is again quite geometric from the rest of the door arm area. Now the armrest and the door pull again have got lots of big shapes going on. Fine, you notice the door pull is just a straight bar across, but then you look at the cutout the knuckles go into, and it's a big semicircle. If you look at slightly obscure music videos from MTV in the 90s, this kind of shape is kind of going on in the background in a lot of those things, normally in bright colours rather than plain black, but it's lots of strong shapes everywhere. Very bold design. We've got the electric windows in front of that because it's electric windows at the front, keep fit windows in the back. There's only the front window switches here. Not one touch, I notice. And below this we've got a very big door pocket. It's a Ford, it's massively practical, so this door pocket is vast, and there's a little round cutout for putting a bottle or a can in the bottom of there, keeping it upright. Good door. Now the dashboard. Again, we've got lots and lots of strong geometric shapes going on. The instrument binnacle and 3 of the air vents are all in their own separate kind of smoothly grained pod, which is like the driver's section of the dashboard, and the rest of the dashboard is kind of plastic elephant hide, which well, that goes up to the windscreen over there. It does separate off for the passenger, and the passenger airbag is moulded in the top of it. Now the air vents, and there are 4 of them, are these kind of fun eyeball vents, so they rotate around, so either you're looking at a weird grid or the side of the Death Star. They're quite cool. I like those. They're very practical, very easy. It's a very simple design. It's quite a clever bit of design because all it is one solid plastic moulding and no moving parts. Just the ball that rotates in there, no clever hinges, no clever cantilevers, no pantograph stuff, just a big plastic ball. Easy. Clever cheapness. Then ahead of you, you have the dials with their crisp, clear sans serif font and the silver painted rings around the rev counter and speedo. They are very crisp, very clear, very legible. The rev counter on the left, the needle on the left only sweeps the top half of the dial from 0 to 7,000 RPM, redlining at 6,000 RPM, which is a bit of a screamer. And in the bottom half, we've got 2 little LCD screens, one for the fuel gauge and one for the temperature, but they're not needles, they're bar charts, so little individual bar sections go up, so you've got an idea of how many tenths of a tank you have really, rather than any definite accuracy until you get into the orange light at the bottom when you need to start borrowing. The speedo on the right hand side reads around for up to 130 miles an hour with a little nubbin beyond that for 140. It's a little optimistic because the top speed on this car is only 103, but you never know, you might get a very steep hill one day and then you might need it. It's good to have it there. The bottom of the speedo also has the digital clock, a little green backed LCD giving a 24-hour time readout, and in between the 2 dials we've got 3 three round-ended rectangles housing all of our warning lights for airbags, central locking, indicators, lights, all the usual warning things you would expect. And finally, two little buttons, one to reset the trip meter and one to reset the clock. Moving back towards you, you've got your typical Ford stalks, indicators and headlights on the left, wipers on the right, with a little clicker for the rear wash wiper as well. Very, very, very Ford indeed. I'm sure you've probably seen something virtually identical in a Focus at some point. And the steering wheel, and the column is adjustable, so you can raise and lower it for your perfect driving position. And the steering wheel, it's leather. Got a nice leather steering wheel in this car. That's a bit of a luxury item. And the centre section of the wheel is the same big semicircle with a flat top that we found over in the door. This contains the airbag, a big Ford badge, and the horn. Let's do a horn test. It's a bit parpy, not my favourite horn. Over to the right of our chunky leather steering wheel, we've got the boot release. And you'll find that getting into the boot is only available by pushing this button or turning the key in the boot lid. So don't forget that that's there. And just below that, hidden behind your wiper stalk, is the light switch. Typical Ford rotating light switch, off to side to dip, and pull once, twice for the front and rear fogs. Now over to the centre console. Now because we're in the Super Mini category, we're getting lots of hard plastic, not sort of soft touch, not leather, not anything like that, no carbon fibre in this car. Now this car has lost its original radio. It's got an aftermarket something or other in it with a little plastic cubby hole above it. Now it would have been a big double-din Ford integrated style to match the car, which would have had CD as standard and the option of Bluetooth. Over to the left of it, we've got a bank of 4 buttons. This car has 2 blanked out, but the 2 centre ones are for heated windows. 2 you say? Yes, I say. One is for the rear screen, very normal and obvious, and the other is for Ford's heated windscreen. Wow, this is one of the best accessories on any car, but I think someone's commented in a previous video that Ford patented this and so other manufacturers just can't do it or something. What a great idea. You come out to work and the car's frosted over and it's freezing cold and you don't want to be doing anything but going back to bed, and you don't have to go and sit there and scrape it and freeze your knuckles. You just hit the button and 30 seconds later you can see out. It's I guess that's why they call it quick clear. Underneath that we've got our heating and ventilation controls, rotating dials for the fan, the temperature, the direction, and underneath that 2 buttons, one to recirculate the air if you're following a smelly truck or going through a tunnel, and the other one for air conditioning. Yeah, we've got AC in this car. These cars were fairly well spec'd. One of the big deals of this car was that the previous generation had been pretty lowly specified, whereas this one they started chucking more options onto it. So standard equipment on all of these Mark 6s, so they all got the CD player, they got intelligent wipers, whatever that means. It's the intelligent protection system, which is airbags and side impact protection, and remote central locking. You can even open the boot off the key. Okay, there are 3 ways to get in the boot. Now below the console we've got a nice big L-shaped cubby hole which you can bury all kinds of stuff in. It's absolutely vast. You can happily lose a large iPhone in there, no problem at all. And the reason it's an L-shaped is because you've got a single cup holder, which is very deep, and it's actually, unlike a Mini, just far enough forward of the dashboard and actually angled ever so slightly. So a tall cup will go into it at an angle forwards and not spill and not fall over and not bash into that, not be blocked off by the lower part of the console and not fall over. This is gripped really well, so it's an excellent cup holder. I'm going to do a quick T-shelf mention here because I'm going to give it a 4 for this, because the one cup holder it's got is excellent, but there is only the one. The drink holders in the door are a little bit low for anything other than a can, and the top of the dashboard is far too slopey for anything, so it gets a 4 for the one excellent cup holder, nothing for anything else. Now, also in this little area here we've got a 12-volt socket, and then we have the 5-speed manual gearbox. There was an automatic, which I believe they call Dura Shift, available I think on the 1.4 and one of the diesels. It may have been available on a couple of other options, but those were the big ones. Then we've got proper mechanical handbrake, which is a good thing, not a silly plastic electronic one, which is annoying. And then the seats. Oh, these seats are really comfortable. You expect maybe a small city car size car to not be that comfortable, but these are really supportive. They're easily as good as the seats in a equivalent level Focus or Mondeo. They're deeply padded and they've got a little bit of sort of side support, and they grip you just enough. They're not intrusively grippy like a sports seat would be if you didn't want to have a full-on sports car. They're just nice, and they've got just a very delicate and inoffensive pattern in the fabric. And look how well they've come up clean, considering they had mould on them a few weeks ago. Right, let's have a quick look in the back. Now, a big improvement over the previous generation Fiesta is the rear space. Oh, hang on, these seat hard rests do need to raise up, otherwise they dig into your back quite a lot. There you go, that's better. And the seats are also deeply padded, nice and comfy, and lots of knee room, lots of foot room, lots of, well, even an okay amount of elbow room really, and a ton of headroom. The car is actually very, very tall for its length. So just like in the front, you've got a stack of headroom. I believe the car is 87 millimeters longer than the previous generation, so that's where the space has come from. In terms of equipment, you've got the headrests, you've got 3 seat belts, one's only a lap belt, and you've got pockets in the back of the 2 front seats. And you've not got grab handles up here, you've only got a little coat hook. In the doors, you've got heated fit windows, not electric here. You've got a door handle to get out again, which is always a positive thing. A speaker, it's actually got quite a decent stereo system in the car. Right, let's have a look in the boot and then take it for a drive. Well, the boot on the Mark 6 is genuinely practical. It is significantly bigger than in the previous generation. It goes back way over here. It's got a low loading lip so you can get things in easily. The rear seats fold down, it's a 60-40 split. Under the carpet there's a full-size spare wheel. There's even a little light up here. Isn't that useful? Driving the Fiesta is just so easy. You pretty much think about it and it happens. You can see why these were so popular with driving schools, because it's just a doddle to drive. First of all, there's the visibility. As well as being 87 millimeters longer than the previous car and 50 millimeters wider as well, which may make it sound like a bit more of a handful around a parking bay, it's actually also 100 millimeters taller. So all this glass area around you just means that you can see everything so clearly in every direction. The posts are quite thick. They're angled in such a way they don't really cause too much of a visual obstruction. So you can see exactly what's going on all around you. What I'm saying right now may not be borne out by the condition of all 4 corners of this car, but it's actually quite easy to work out where the front corners are, because you can see the big creases in the shape of the bonnet, and the rear corners of the car are basically exactly where the corner of the car is on the outside. There's no big further overhangs than those D-posts, so it should be extremely easy to drive without having any kind of incident. I say should be. As I say, the corners of this car do not bear witness to my statement. So it's easy to see out of it. And what else? Well, it's possibly one of the lightest things I've ever driven. The steering is like feather light to the touch. The pedals are all incredibly light as well. The accelerator has got a little bit of weight to it. The brakes have got a fair degree of travel actually on the pedal, but they do bite pretty hard. ABS is on this car. Whoops, I've just lost my notebook. But not standard on the lowest cars, but was an option on everything. And the clutch, again, is very light. And the gear shift on this thing is feather light and so nice and accurate. You can just dance through the gears of this little 5-speed so happily. It's why this is such a great car to learn in. If this is a first car for anyone, the Fiesta is just brilliant because it does everything exactly as you want it to. No hassle, no stress, and it does it well. I mean, it's not massively rapid. Top speed is 103, which is respectable. 0 to 60, 12.5 seconds, 12.3. Which is again okay, but if you're learning, you don't want something that's going to lose control. It is just nice and stable and planted. And the economy on this thing, wow! This thing does 45.9 to the gallon combined. That's really good. And it's not just a city car. I'm here right now on a dual carriageway. We're doing 50 miles an hour because that's the speed limit here. And it's so smooth and composed. It's not jittery, it's not wandering, it's not bouncing around, panicking that it's not in proper control. It's fantastic. What a great car. It really is a brilliant all-rounder. And it was a real all-rounder because they sold it in so many body styles. There were the 3 and the 5-door hatchbacks like we have here. There was the panel van. There was the Fusion, the tall version. And this was the first variant of the Fiesta to be sold in Asia and Australia. Apparently there'd been a previous version for those areas. There's something built by Kia, which was not exactly under license, but in conjunction with Kia, called the Festiva. In terms of trim levels, there were quite a few, something for every budget, something Ford does very well. Starting with something called the Finesse, which sounds posh, but it's actually the most basic level they do. Then you had the LX, then the Zetec and the Zetec S, and then up to the posh ones, the extra luxury of the Ghia, or the extra sporty of the ST. Now, the ST was a bit of an animal. That's definitely a car worth getting your hands on, because this chassis is brilliant. It's a really well sorted car, and the 1.4, it uses it as best it can, and you can throw it into a corner and it will grip nice and happily. But this thing is really good to drive. You know, after I'd finished cleaning it, I joked I didn't want to hand it over, but that's actually only half a joke really, because this thing just does everything so well. It's comfortable, it's practical, it's got decent load space, it's got decent rear space, so you can take 4 or 5 people and luggage quite happily. It's a rewarding thing to drive. If you're going somewhere with some good back roads where you want to push it through a corner or two, it'll do that absolutely fine. And if you've got to go on the motorway, it will do that equally well. There's pretty much nothing to dislike about this car. You can see why it was consistently in the top 10 best-selling cars in Great Britain throughout its entire production run. So, as you can probably see looking around this car, this has lived a life, and to misquote Meatloaf, you know it's got the scars to prove it. But looking around, what's actually broken? And beyond the panel work and some slightly iffy rattle can paint repairs, is anything broken? No. The only things that don't work on this car are the air conditioning, which may just need a regas. We've not looked into that one yet. And the slightly leaky rocker cover. That's not a major fail. On the inside, the only control or button that's in any way deviating from new is indicator, which is a little bit floppy. And everything else is just fine. The plastics are incredibly tough and hard wearing. There's a few little small scuffs in them that won't polish out, but on the whole they are pretty much exactly as they left Almusafs, which is near Valencia in Spain, and I'm sure I said that wrong. That's what they built these things. But the engine still runs sweet, the gearbox is absolute joy, the brakes are good, although we did just change the pads a couple of weeks ago. The instruments all work perfectly, the speedo and rev counter are bang on, the fuel gauge indicates the level of the fuel as it should do, even the quick clear windscreen appears to function. So the quality of this car is unquestionable. The only real fault with the car, if you're looking at buying one of these second hand, you would obviously need to check out the service history, the cam belt, that rocker cover, does that need doing? The garage around the corner has quoted £70 to replace that, including parts and labour. And rust, because the sills do start to go and the arches start to go on them, because they're a 15-year-old car now. In fact, the oldest ones are pushing 20. So by saying that this is a great first car, I'm actually doing the car a bit of a disservice. It's way more than that. This is a great car for anyone who wants a car of this size and wants to spend, say, under £1,000. You really cannot fault this car. And Ford are, in some ways, doing themselves out of business by building a car this good back in the mid-noughties. Why bother buying a new one? So I am now on one of my favourite bits of road. It's not massively fast, but it does have some amazing switchback turns with weird camber, which are a real test of a car. It's always a test of how good a car's chassis and suspension are. And bear in mind, this is a semi-neglected mid-level Super Mini. Oh, this thing just hugs the road like crazy. What a great little car. It's not that fast, it's really not that powerful, but it does just really engage. You can see with a basis like this why the Puma was such an incredible thing to drive. There are sometimes periods in kind of car history when you look at one particular model and you just wonder, why would anyone buy anything else? The Mark II Cavalier, why would you buy a Sierra? The Sierra was good, but the Mark II Cavalier was so good. And then you look at this, why would you buy a Corsa when there's this to choose from? Well, thanks for joining me out in the Hedge Fund Fiesta, not the Hedge Fund Fiesta, if only it was. I'd be buying that Alpha I drove the other day, if it was a Hedge Fund Fiesta. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, please hit like, please hit subscribe. If you love the channel, head to one of the links above and below, grab yourself a sticker or a t-shirt or a mug. And if you want to see more, smash, I believe that's the YouTube word, the subscribe button and the bell notification to see when more stuff comes out. I'll see you all again very soon driving something completely different.